The heart of the forest, the morning mist clung to the towering pines like whispered secrets, drifting through the ancient forest where Marcus had made his home for the past 5 years. His weathered hands gripped the worn handle of his axe as he surveyed the tree line, choosing his work for the day. The rhythmic thud of steel meeting wood had become his meditation, the only sound besides bird song that filled his solitary world. Marcus had come to these remote Oregon mountains seeking silence after the noise of civilization had become too much. Here, 20 miles from the nearest town, he lived in a modest cabin he'd built with his own hands. His nearest neighbor was a family of deer that visited his clearing each evening. The isolation suited him perfectly, or so he told himself during the long winter nights when the wind howled through the branches like lonely spirits. On this particular Tuesday morning, something felt different. The usual forest sounds seemed muted, as if the woodland creatures were holding their breath. Marcus paused in his work, wiping sweat from his brow as he listened. Then he heard it. A faint cry carried on the mountain breeze, so soft he almost dismissed it as the call of a distant hawk. But hawks didn't call for help. Setting down his axe, Marcus followed the sound deeper into the forest, his boots crunching softly on the carpet of fallen leaves. The cry came again, weaker this time, from somewhere beyond a dense thicket of blackberry vines. He pushed through the thorny barrier, ignoring the scratches on his arms, until he reached a small clearing where the canopy opened like a window to the sky. There, collapsed beside a moss-covered fallen log, lay a woman. Her expensive hiking boots were caked with mud, and her designer jacket was torn in several places. Dark hair fell across her pale face, and even unconscious, she wore an expression of determination that spoke of someone unaccustomed to surrender. A nasty gash on her left leg had soaked through her torn pants, and her breathing was shallow but steady. Marcus knelt beside her, gently checking for other injuries. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" His voice, unused to speaking aloud for days at a time, came out rougher than intended. Her eyelids fluttered, revealing deep brown eyes that struggled to focus. Where?" she whispered, trying to sit up before wincing in pain. "Easy now," Marcus said softly, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he helped her lean against the log. "You're hurt pretty bad. How long have you been out here?" She closed, her eyes thinking. 2 days, maybe 3. I got separated from my group during the storm Sunday night, fell down a ravine and hurt my leg." Her voice carried a slight tremor, whether from cold or fear he couldn't tell. Marcus studied her face, noting the quality of her gear despite its current state. Even disheveled and injured, there was something refined about her that seemed out of place in these wild mountains. "I'm Marcus," he said simply. "I live not far from here. Let me help you." "Elena," she replied, managing a weak smile, "and I would be very grateful for your help." Without another word, Marcus scooped her up in his arms, surprised by how light she felt despite her obvious strength. Elena didn't protest, too exhausted and relieved to maintain any pretense of independence. As he carried her through the forest, she found herself studying his profile, the strong jaw covered in several days' stubble, the kind eyes that seemed to see everything, the careful way he navigated obstacles to avoid jarring her injured leg. The walk to his cabin took 20 minutes, during which Elena drifted in and out of consciousness. She woke fully when Marcus settled her onto his simple wooden couch, the first piece of furniture she'd seen in days that wasn't made of stone or earth. His cabin was spartanly furnished but meticulously clean. Handmade shelves lined the walls, filled with books on forestry, philosophy, and, surprisingly, classical literature. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, its warmth immediately welcoming. Everything spoke of a man who had chosen simplicity but maintained dignity in his solitude. "This might sting a bit," Marcus warned as he cleaned her wound with practiced efficiency. His touch was careful, professional, and Elena found herself wondering about his background. Most hermits didn't possess such medical knowledge or maintain such gentle bedside manner. "You've done this before," she observed, watching him work. Marcus nodded, not looking up from her leg. "Medic in the Army long time ago. Then I worked emergency response for the Forest Service before—" He trailed off, focusing intently on bandaging her wound. "Before you decided to disappear into the mountains?" Elena asked gently. Their eyes met for a moment, and Marcus saw understanding there rather than judgment. "Something like that," he said quietly. Over the next 3 days, as Elena's strength returned, an unlikely friendship bloomed between them. She helped with simple tasks around the cabin while her leg healed, and Marcus found himself enjoying conversation for the first time in years. Elena spoke of her love for hiking, her concern for conservation, and her work with various environmental organizations. She was knowledgeable about forestry practices and asked thoughtful questions about sustainable logging. What she didn't mention was the fleet of search helicopters that had been combing the mountains for the past week, or the reward her family had posted for her safe return. She didn't speak of the Fortune 500 company she'd inherited from her father, or the board meeting she'd been fleeing when she'd impulsively joined the hiking expedition. For these few precious days, she was simply Elena, a woman who'd found unexpected peace in a mountain cabin with a man who asked nothing of her but honest conversation. On the 4th morning, the sound of helicopter rotors echoed through the valley. Elena stood at the cabin window, watching the aircraft circle overhead, and Marcus saw the change in her posture immediately. The relaxed woman who'd been helping him split kindling was gone, replaced by someone preparing to shoulder tremendous responsibility. "They're looking for you," he said. It wasn't a question. Elena turned to face him, and Marcus saw something in her eyes he hadn't noticed before. The weight of obligation, of decisions that affected thousands of lives, of a loneliness different from, but perhaps deeper than his own. "Elena Castellanos," she said simply, as if the name explained everything. Marcus didn't recognize it immediately, but the way she said it, the resignation in her voice, told him everything he needed to know. "The Castellanos Foundation," he said, finally. "The conservation work, the reforestation projects," she nodded. "Among other things. My father built an empire, and when he died 2 years ago, I inherited more money and responsibility than any one person should carry." She moved closer to him, her injured leg barely slowing her down. "I came on this hiking trip to escape for a few days, to remember what it felt like to be just Elena, not the CEO, not the heiress, not the person everyone expects to have all the answers." The helicopter was getting closer, and they both knew their time was ending. "You could stay," Marcus said quietly, though they both knew it was impossible. Elena reached up and touched his face gently. "And you could come with me. I could use someone who understands both the forest and people's hearts. My foundation is always looking for people with your expertise." Marcus caught her hand in his, holding it against his cheek for a moment. "The mountains are my peace, Elena. Just like that world out there is your calling." They stood in silence, listening to the approaching rescue, both understanding that some connections transcend circumstances even when those same circumstances make them impossible to pursue. As the search team approached the cabin, Elena turned back to Marcus one final time. "The Castellanos Foundation is funding a new sustainable forestry program in Oregon. We'll need a consultant who understands these mountains, someone who can ensure we do it right. The position comes with a cabin, complete autonomy, and a commitment to protecting these forests." Marcus smiled, the first truly joyful expression she'd seen from him. "I'll consider it." But they both knew he would do more than consider it. As Elena was helped into the helicopter, she looked down at the small cabin and the man standing beside it and realized that sometimes getting lost was the only way to find what you'd been searching for all along. The helicopter lifted off, carrying Elena back to her world of boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions. But she left a part of herself in that mountain clearing, just as Marcus found a part of himself he'd thought was lost forever. 6 months later, when he accepted the position as director of the Castellanos Mountain Forest Initiative, they would discover that some rescues work both ways, and that finding each other was worth getting lost for. The mountains kept their secrets, but this one had a happy ending that echoed through the valley like morning bird song, promising new beginnings for two hearts that had found their way home.